Greetings and welcome to another Blender tutorial. Today we're gonna learn how to destroy things. Don't try this at home because some add-ons are really unstable, your Blender gonna crash. So today we're gonna learn about soft body, rigid body, build modifier, explode modifier, cloth simulation with zero stiffness, boolean modifier, molecular and molecular second time for the wind. First, let's start with a soft body demolition. Go ahead and download the demolition branch from graphical.org and launch it. Create a cube, make it soft body, but let's take a moment to subdivide the cube, because subdivided cube is always a nice thing to have in our scenes. Select random polygons, subdivide it, repeat this process till we make a chaotically subdivided cube. Now, if we start simulation, our cube will collapse into itself because its mass is too high. Let's lower it a bit. By lowering it, we just make it stay in place and wait for the collision. And our collision object is just a sphere with the collision set in physics. Now what we're gonna do is to separate individual faces. Let's extrude first individual faces by pressing Alt-E, then invert selection and delete faces. This way each face gets separated. After that, just lower the breaking limit to something like 0.01 and watch how this cube got fractured. Okay, rigid body physics and self-fracture. This is probably the most common way to destroy things in Blender. First we need to actually fracture objects using the self-fracture add-on. Let's set up the particle system. This add-on will use the particles as a guide for the fracture effect, then just set the source limit and hit OK. After we get the object fractured, we need to just set it to active in the physics rollout and set the environment to passive, and our cube is destroyed. The trick here is that the collision object is animated using keyframes, but just before the collision, the animated checkbox is disabled to make the physics do its job. And one more thing, all objects start deactivated. But what if we want our objects to stay in place and not just fall apart? What I like to use is a bullet constraint tools for Blender. It's an add-on, just install it and you never regret this. Let's just select all shards, enable breakable and then press X constraints to get it constrained. If you need to update the settings, just select the rigid body constraints, change settings and press update. And we can immediately see the effect when cube doesn't fall apart and the simulation is more complex. The destruction technique number 4, the build modifier. This modifier can be used for this kind of dissolving effect, you know. When object is hit with a plasma beam, it got dissolved. So let's add a build modifier, set it to reversed, and set the randomize checkbox. This way, cube goes from solid to shutter state from frame 1 to frame 100. Oh, and don't forget to subdivide cube randomly, just like we did before. Explode modifier. This modifier can look unrealistic in terms of shattering, but it can be used in production. This shattering effect is guided mainly by the particle system. The individual polygons get attached to the particles and just fly away with them. And what I find interesting about this technique is that we need our randomly subdivided cube again. It's like our cube companion from Portal. So let's go ahead and discuss a cloth simulation. It's something unusual to deform things with a cloth, but it's very interesting. Try it out and you'll be happy with the result. Let's start by adding a cloth modifier, but when you simulate right now, the cloth will collapse. And it's because the stiffness is set to a high number. And if we lower stiffness and set it to 0, the cube will no longer move this way. It will behave more like a steel door which is being attacked by the monster, which is pretty cool effect. And pretty unpredictable effect, because You know, I didn't even think about using cloth to deform things this way. Okay, let's move to Boolean modifier technique. It's not even technique at all, because it's too easy, you know. Create some planes, or actually this isn't planes, this is more like boxes because it has thickness. Join it together and then use a Boolean modifier to subtract it from the cube. Use a difference mode. As you can see, our chunks got separated, and when we just activate physics and make it slide. Now let's discuss the molecular add-on. This is a very interesting add-on to make all kinds of simulations using particle system like sand, dirt and whatever. First thing that we're gonna do is to make the cube stay in place. For that, we will activate the particle linking and set the particle size to just collide with each other, and also set the side deflect checkbox. Right now we can see that if we don't activate the particle link and then just fall apart, set the search radius to 3.5 and don't forget to crank up the subframe to something like 32 or even 64. The add-on becomes very slow at these values, but if the simulation is unstable, try this. The trick here is to set the cache step to 1, because by default it's set to something like 10, and this is not right for our simulation when we play it back. Now the technique number 9, it is the same molecular add-on. I think it can be used to make some kind of wind simulation. Let's just set up the same cube full of particles and then make a second particle system with a pretty high particle weight set in the molecular rollout. After that, let's just set checkbox, activate collision with others and play back our animation. We've got a wind. Okay, I hope you enjoyed these quick tips about destroying stuff in Blender. Go ahead and explode something, blow something up. It was Gleb Alexandro, and we'll see you next time.